From New York, this is ABC News. Now, Harry Reasoner.
Good evening. Mao Tse-Tung, the most powerful influence on China since Confucius, has died at the age of 82. What finally brought the enfeebled old lion down was not announced. He's been very ill for years and has not, so far as is known, received any foreign visitors since June. Mao's death leaves only one man, Tito of Yugoslavia, of the group of 20th century revolutionaries who were not only leaders but cults, near deities of their nations. China has known he was ill, but the hierarchy handled the final news briefly. It said little more than that he was dead. Mao Zedong had a strange appeal to aesthetes and rebels all over the world, people who would not have been tolerated for a day inside Mao's China. But they found something in his style that stirred them. The style came out of tough substance. Very few people who went through what Mao went through lived that long. Ken Kashiwahara reports on the long life of the chairman.
It took Mao Zedong more than 2 decades to unite the world's largest country under the communist flag, alternately battling the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek, then the Japanese, then the nationalists again. At one point, Mao barely escaped defeat by leading 90,000 men, women, and children on the now legendary Long March, 6,000 miles across the rugged face of China to the caves of Yan'an. Here, the peasant army controlled the countryside during the long and bitter war. Finally, in 1949, victory for the Red Army. Chiang Kai-shek was forced into exile on Taiwan, and Mao Zedong took up residence in Peking, the traditional home of China's emperors. From there, Mao set out to change not only the face of China, but her mind as well. He wanted to erase the Chinese past from the Chinese mind and create a new superhuman Chinese being. The old human imperfections, selfishness, and greed were out, and self-sacrifice for the common good was in. But the weapon of change was the purge, and that sometimes resulted in thousands of deaths. Mao's first order of business was to industrialize a backward economy, and to do so, he sought help from the Russians, signing a treaty that linked the two giants of the communist world. But that was not to last. Russia's coexistence with the West went against Mao's belief that communism should encourage violent revolution. There were border clashes, and today it is the Soviet Union that China considers its most serious threat. So Mao struck out on his own, parceling out land to the peasants, rebuilding industry, and even pushing China into the atomic age. But things did not always go the chairman's way. Mao's great leap forward in the late 50s failed, and from then, opposition to his ideas grew. In the mid-60s, it reached serious proportions, prompting the greatest purge of them all, the Cultural Revolution led by the young Red Guards. Mao saw his country backsliding into the ways of old China, into a capitalist creation of upper and lower classes, and toward a Soviet-style bureaucracy. So he sought to purify the masses and to oust a pro-Soviet faction that had turned against him. But it wasn't easy. At one point, Mao was driven out of Peking and was even reported dead. So to prove with typically dramatic flair that he was not only alive but in good health, he was photographed swimming the Yangtze River, 9 miles in 65 minutes, the announcement said. Skeptics, however, doubted that even the chairman's health was that good. The Cultural Revolution exacted a heavy toll. There were riots, work stoppages, destruction of property, and killing. At one point, the nation appeared on the verge of another civil war. But moderates like Zhou Enlai argued that the revolution had gone too far, and Mao called the violent excesses to a halt. Toward the end of his long reign, Mao realized that his ideological purity was hampering China's advancement in technology and her economy. So he agreed to compromise, continuing the hardline class struggle at home, while at the same time approving a careful opening of China's doors to the West. For America, it began with ping pong and climaxed with an American president setting foot in communist Peking. Chairman Mao was to meet a second American president before he died, and relations today have reached a point where most observers expect an American ambassador to take up Peking residence soon. Mao's last foreign visitor was Pakistan's Prime Minister Ali Bhutto, and as the film showed then, Mao's health was deteriorating rapidly. Today, Mao's death solves one of China's current problems, the increasing state of tension attributed to the uncertainty of Mao's health. But it also creates another, the intense struggle for succession that is sure to follow. Ken Kashiwahara, ABC News, Hong Kong.
The Chinese government has proclaimed a week of mourning to begin Saturday in memory of the chairman. No date or site has been announced for the funeral, but the Chinese have already said that no foreign dignitaries will be invited. On the island of Taiwan, where the nationalist Chinese have been opposing Mao for 3 decades, the news came across in somewhat different form. Radio stations announced it by saying, quote, "Now we have some very good news to report to you. Mao Tse-Tung, the bandit leader, is dead." We'll have more on Chairman Mao in a moment.
Acid indigestion sufferers, all antacids are not alike. Digel is different. This animation illustrates how trapped gas often churns up with excess stomach acid. Plain antacids have nothing to relieve this problem, but Digel is different. It adds a special anti-gas medicine to its soothing antacids. The Digel difference works fast to help break up trapped gas and relieve acid indigestion misery. For more complete relief, get the Digel difference.
Backache, painful, nagging backache, muscular aches and pains from overexertion or everyday stress and strain. When they strike, you can get relief with rubs, or heating pads, or other surface remedies. Or you can take Doan's pills. Doan's works different than surface remedies to ease painful backache. Doan's analgesic pain-relieving action often brings hours of relief. Doan's pills work different than surface remedies to relieve nagging backache.
I wonder whether you've been hunting for a flavor which will add sparkle to your food. I'd like to show you one, because this is Kikkoman teriyaki sauce. It adds flavor as a marinade, first of all. It has wonderful ingredients in which are just a one-hit marinade. And at the same time, it can be brushed onto a chicken, and a fabulous glaze and aroma, and the flavor is wonderful, as it is with fish, and also with a marvelous flank steak. Now, that is a flavor, literally, that sparkles. Kikkoman teriyaki.
Lavores. Lavores? Lavores? Patty! Okay, where's the Lavores? We don't have any. We must. I just had some yesterday. You were at the dentist yesterday. You know, you're right. And my mouth felt clean and fresh, and my breath terrific.
More dentists use Lavores than any other mouthwash.
And that's good enough for me.
Although Chairman Mao has been ill for many months, his physical presence apparently put a brake on power struggles and policy changes inside China. His death may change all that, but answers to the questions of who and what will follow are hard to find. Barry Dunsmore reports from the State Department.
The impact of Mao's death on U.S.-Chinese relations has, of course, been a matter of intense concern here at the State Department today. But frankly, the United States does not know a great deal about internal Chinese affairs. When Premier Zhou Enlai died, the experts unanimously picked Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping as his successor. Almost immediately after, Teng was purged. Kissinger's statement today is a reflection of this uncertainty.
The basis of the relationship between China and the United States is mutual interest. I believe that these mutual interests are to some extent independent of personalities, and that therefore the main lines of the policies are likely to be continued. We have to remember, when a towering figure disappears from the scene, not even his successors can know exactly what the shape of events will be, and it is premature to speculate as to what the future evolution should be.
Some critics of U.S. policy have urged that we should have struck a deal with Mao before he died on the issue of Taiwan. It's argued that there is growing Chinese impatience with the U.S. over a lack of progress towards normalization, which depends upon withdrawal from Taiwan. A new regime might want to take a new look at the U.S. because of this. However, Kissinger dismissed this today, saying normalization is not tied to the lifetime of personalities. Barry Dunsmore, ABC News at the State Department.
The Soviet Union today sent deep condolences to China on Mao's death. However, the Russians have shown little affection for Mao or his policies in recent years, and ABC's Lynn Jones reports from Moscow that they are not likely to change now.
Kremlin leaders are not going to mourn Mao Tse-Tung's death for long. Soviet propaganda blasts routinely blame the Chinese leader for worsening relations between the two countries. Recent reports in the Soviet media have hinted that when Mao died, Kremlin leaders would be ready to start with a clean slate. An article in Pravda a few months ago reviewed the history of talks between the Chinese and Soviets in Peking, which have been going on for several years, which have accomplished little toward their stated purpose, to improve relations. Some diplomats here believe the article was a message to Chinese leaders that all the overtures, treaties, and concessions the Soviets have ever made to China are still open. Chinese leaders have constantly rejected or simply not answered Soviet offers, according to the article. The amount of anti-Chinese propaganda put out by the Soviets will likely lessen a great deal or maybe even disappear. Some China watchers here believe the Soviets will try to identify pro-Moscow Chinese leaders and then attempt to lend them support in Peking. In short, with Mao Tse-Tung dead, the Kremlin figures it's a new ball game. Soviet leaders will try to make peace with Peking, whoever turns out to be the new dominant leaders. In the coming months, the Kremlin probably hopes Peking will be receptive to new high-level negotiations. But even if relations improve slightly between Moscow and Peking, they aren't likely to suddenly become friends. Lynn Jones, ABC News, Moscow.
Observers don't expect the Chinese to name a new party chairman immediately, but rather to rule by committee for a while. In the interim, ABC's John Scali reports that two figures appear to be in contention for the chairmanship. Acting Premier Hua Guofeng, who has been most visible in recent months. His most serious rival, says Scali, is Zhang Junqiao, a protege of Mao's widow and a disciple of Mao himself. At present, Zhang is acting Secretary General of the Communist Party. To a large extent, the people in foreign capitals speculating about what happens now are in the dark, and that may be true of some high-placed people in Peking, too. Because while the influence of Mao was very wide over several generations of Chinese, nobody knows how deep it was. The answer could be years in coming, as hundreds of millions of young Chinese who have known no God but Mao grow up. ABC's Ted Koppel saw some of that in a 1973 documentary called The People's Republic of China.
It is a stirring and colorful introduction to the socialist ethic which will mold their lives. Hands raised in the salute of their organization, these little Red Guards are about to induct 33 new members. They are 7 and 8 and 9 years old, and they are swearing the first solemn oath of their lives. I am a little Red Guard of Chairman Mao, they are saying. I am determined to listen to Chairman Mao's teaching, to love the motherland, to love the people, to love science, labor, and public property. I am determined to study hard and make progress every day. I am ready to sacrifice myself for the cause of communism. This is not a family affair with proud parents poking one another in the ribs. Let us march forward under Chairman Mao's guidance, this 8-year-old is saying, to be true proletarian successors of the proletarian cause. The red kerchiefs are symbolic corners of the Chinese Communist flag. These are Mao Zedong's successors.